Good morning, our esteemed viewers. Today we're discussing digital innovation in Zambia. How can we tap into local talent and capabilities? My name is Chanda Mwila. I am the head of Transaction Products and Services at Stanbic Bank Zambia Limited. With me today is Mr. Lukonga Lindunda, who is the co-founder and executive director of Bongo Hive. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Lukonga is a Mandela Washington Fellow with 11 years experience working with entrepreneurs and development partners, who began his career providing technical assistance in educational projects and programs by building sustainable and affordable ICT infrastructure and support systems with the Education Development Center and VVOB. In 2011, he co-founded Bongo Hive, Zambia's first technology and innovation hub, with 3 colleagues, after noting a gap in the support young entrepreneurs needed to get their innovative business ideas to life. Since 2011, Bongo Hive has facilitated the mobilization of over $1 million United States dollars in resources to 1,300 startups and micro, small and medium enterprises, allowing these enterprises to develop their ideas and grow. With that introduction, Lukonga, I'd like to welcome you again to the program and thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So I've spoken a little bit about Bongo Hive, but I'd like to hear from you. What exactly prompted you to start it up?
So we work with great minds building viable solutions that change the world. We've been around for about 9 years now. I remember when we started, it was a very basic idea. My fellow co-founders and I had a bit of experience, working outside the country, studying outside the country. We came back, had interesting experiences trying to find our feet. And one of the things which was common between the 4 of us, and the 4th co-founder, Bart, he's a Belgian, and he had been working in Zambia for quite a while. What was very interesting about our interaction was that we were all looking for ways in which we could improve the country by using technology, but also find ways in which we could collaborate. And when we noticed that we didn't have an environment or a platform where young people, like-minded people who love technology could bring their ideas to life, we thought that we could actually do something about it. So I think the meeting of the minds was important, first of all, and that we had a common interest. But a couple of other things that happened on the continent were very important to us finding our feet in 2011. I think there are 3 or 4 things which were very important. Around 2011, there was a number of narratives around how Africa was a mobile-first continent. And one interesting thing which happened in Kenya, for example, Safaricom, which is well known for M-Pesa, decided to stop selling feature phones. So we're sitting here in Zambia and thinking to ourselves, wow, there's a mobile revolution happening out there. Internet also, we had a number of fiber optic cables across the continent, undersea cables that were bringing more internet onto the continent. And we had seen that there were a number of people in different countries that were now thinking, how do we harness the talent that is there on the continent? And so we saw other people creating these, we now call them hubs. And previously, they were called just common spaces, right? And so when we saw that other people were doing that in other countries, we decided that we could also do something like that in Zambia. So, of course, there were different people involved, common goal. And at the end of the day, it was about starting and doing something which would solve a gap or a problem that we saw existed in our local ecosystem. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very interesting. So you've talked about having noticed some trends that were happening in 2011. What would you say is the single most defining trend that you're seeing in the world and in Zambia that we could actually build up on and benefit from?
So it's very interesting when you look at the trends right now across the globe. We're seeing artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, blockchain.
All the fancy terms.
Yeah, IoT, Internet of Things, VR, AR, so virtual reality, augmented reality. So all those they sound like fancy terms. But in the way that we live our lives, most of this stuff is actually embedded in how we use technology. So when we see that the technology is adapting to our needs, right? So it can say your name, you can talk to it, all those things are fancy technologies that are running behind the scenes, right? And you ask a good question, how can we leverage on that, right? And it's not a very simple question or an answer that I can give, but I have to give sort of a couple of things which are important in understanding how we can leverage on that. So a couple of factors that are very important. First of all, if we look at how young we are as a population, so we're like the 8th youngest country in the world, right? If you look at peace, for example, we're I think the 4th most peaceful country on the continent and 44th in the world. So the statistics are showing us that, first of all, we have the advantage of not having confusion, for lack of a better term, but also we have a young population, which means we can focus. And I think that the most important thing we should look at is the potential that our young people have. So we have fancy technologies, right? And we joke about how in China, you know, the kids are the ones that are assembling some of these phones as a joke, right? But what we can learn from that when we see the technologies coming from the West or the East is that young people in Zambia, once they are armed, or you know, we give them the tools that are relevant for the future, right? Teach them how to leverage on AI, teach them the skills needed to leverage on machine learning and all these things. That is where the advantage is. So we've seen other countries where we have older populations, and we know, you know, I'm getting old now, it's much more difficult for me to learn things. But when you have a young population, people that are willing, able, that have time on their hands, that have aspirations, I think if we arm them with the knowledge and the skills that is necessary, that is strategic, that is forward-thinking, I think that's when we can really begin to unlock the hidden potential that Zambia has. That is the young people, there's our stability, our positioning, but also that with COVID, it's a good example. It's accelerating the adoption of technology. So if we have young people that are available, have time, have the skills, and once we connect them to this sort of globalized environment where they're using technology proactively for different things, I think that's where we can really unlock the potential that we have as a country and leverage on technology. Yeah.
So it's interesting, Lukonga, that you mention the topic of talent and education and so on and so forth. I just wanted to find out from you, how do you track talent? How does the talent out there become aware of what Bongo Hive has to offer them?
Right. I think the issue of talent is very, very interesting, first of all, because a lot of people complain about it, right? So you're a bank, attracting the best talent locally is tough, right? We know what the education system can do for us, and we can complain all day about it. I think what we've done quite well is to build the right partnerships. We have about 23 partnerships right now, and we have partnerships with some very good global companies like Facebook, Amazon, and those allow us to tap into global platforms, technology platforms that are very useful for people trying to understand technology, trying to leverage on technology to do so many things. So the partnerships are really important to bring relevance. And we know that for a lot of people in universities right now, the challenge is just being relevant to industry, understanding what's going on, what are the trends and all those things. So I think the partnerships bring a huge component to it, but being locally relevant is also important. And that's why our programs are around solving problems. If you are an entrepreneur, you understand technology, the next thing is technology for what? And I think that bringing the context there is important for attracting talent, because then I'm telling you, if you are talented, that your talent needs to solve something, right? And if I am able to help you understand what the problems are, opportunities are in the market, and provide you with the right support system, then your talent becomes relevant. And you could also just be an employee at a bank like Stanbic. But once you're exposed to thinking outside the box, thinking around innovation and all those things, you're also relevant in the workplace. So I think the topic of talent is important, and the partnerships are what unlock the potential that's there. And also that you have to be relevant. So bringing on board different types of players in what we do at BongoHive has been very key in us unlocking potential that young people have in Zambia. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think you touched on a good point, and you did mention earlier on partnerships with organizations in other countries. Now, when we think about innovation, usually people think of Google and Apple and all those big names. And even in Africa itself, people look to Nigeria and Kenya. Rarely do people believe that we actually do have innovators in Zambia. So I'd just like for you to talk about the capabilities that are available for startups to tap into in terms of innovation in Zambia.
So I think that when you're asking about what corporates can benefit from startups and how startups can benefit from corporates, what I see, first thing that comes to mind is that there's a disconnect, right? And we work with corporates and different organizations in our technology consulting arm, which is called Bongo Hive Consult. And what we do is we help organizations to understand how to innovate. And usually there are two things. You are either openly innovating, so open innovation, or you're closed in the way that you innovate, so there's closed innovation. And what we've noticed is that because most corporates locally don't understand how to innovate, by the time you're bringing in a startup, no matter how amazing they are or crazy they are, if a corporate or an organization is not structured in a way that can tap into innovation that exists outside the organization, no matter how much the startup tries to impress you, sometimes the challenge is you just don't have the legal document that will enable that partnership to happen, right? And so that aspect is important, that corporates understand how to innovate, and we've been able to help corporates to do that over the years, so that's a huge factor. But also working with startups to help them understand the B2B market, help them understand how to run a solid business. So by the time they walk into your office, they know what they're talking about, and they have the numbers and all those things. That's very important. And what we've seen over the years is as we support the different startups and they grow to the point that they are fundraising, the perspective changes between them and the corporate. Lupia is a good example. They just raised $1 million yesterday, so it's they are a lending platform, right? A startup started by a couple. They've now raised $1 million, and as a bank and a huge institution, you see that you're like, wow, okay, people having ideas now are scaling. It's no longer just a conversation. It's not just a happy thing to talk about. Say, oh, we're innovating. We have young people innovating. But once you start seeing startups growing, fundraising, gaining momentum in the industry, as a corporate, as a player, big player in the space, you see that, and you see that as an opportunity. If you can partner with them, you can get into new markets. A startup will be more agile, potentially more nimble. They're on the ground. They understand the context much better, and I think that helps in creating a better sort of a credibility that helps you as a big corporate and other organizations out there to partner with startups. So I think that there's two sides to it, right? So the corporates themselves, big organizations, understanding how to innovate, how to work with startups and high growth businesses out there, but also startups growing to a point that they are credible enough to provide a service to a bigger organization without all these problems and stories that we've heard before. And BongoHive then plays in the middle, sort of trying to help different stakeholders understand what they need to do in order to really unlock the power of innovation that's there in the different stakeholders that are there. Okay,
so Lukonga, you were talking about a very interesting point for me. That's the gap between the startups and the large corporates. And that gap is usually in the way that we do things, where we have different ways of doing things, different histories, and probably different future outlooks. And I'm glad that you're playing a go-between role there. What I'd like to find out from you is how can financial service providers such as Stanbic Bank use the capabilities of Bongo Hive to basically help us achieve better innovation and financial inclusion, because that's very topical at the moment.
Very, very, very good question. I think that there are two sides to that. There is the institution. I think the way that we run what we do as Bongo Hive, we help corporates like Stanbic to understand how to innovate, right? That's well and good, and we do that very, very well. The other side of it is we create programs that organizations like Stanbic can innovate by tapping into open knowledge, and startups out there. So if Stanbic has specific problems that they are facing, we help you ask the question clearly to the world out there, so that you can find startups that solve your problems, right? And we call that open innovation. We see that what you usually see is competitions. Now I run away from saying it's a competition. Like, okay, let's give you 5,000 kwacha so that you come up with an idea. Look, it's great, but the real value that's unlocked there is that for the things that you can't do, because day to day, you're in the business, you are managing, very important things. But the problems that you're facing, you may not have teams within the organization that can really solve for them, right? But there's someone out there who maybe, they spend 24 hours in a day solving for the same problem, and they're an amazing startup that's starting up, great talent on the team. But the connection is important. And especially for financial inclusion, where we're seeing that the challenges that people are facing in being excluded, in some cases, there is no business model. It's difficult, right? So we can talk about financial inclusion here. Someone in the middle of nowhere wants to transact, and you're thinking as a bank, it's expensive, how do we get there? But if there are startups that are solving for those problems, and they've figured out the perfect way, or at least an appropriate way, for people to transact, to be included out there, that's where we see the opportunity is for financial service providers to partner, acquire, invest in, find ways to work with startups out there where it's complementary. And it's great that the past, I think, 3 to 5 years, we've seen a lot more collaboration. So now, with mobile money service providers and banks, and there's so much integration with the new national financial switch, there's even more opportunity to collaborate. But I still come back to the point that collaboration is key, and being as open as possible, engaging with the local startup ecosystem will unlock opportunities not just for you, but for the startups as well. And the strengths, the strides that, things that you have achieved over the how many ever years you've been in Zambia are important to the industry. And if startups can ride on your success and help you unlock opportunities in the market, it's a win-win for every one of us. So I think that as BongoHive will provide great service for corporates to unlock innovation, but also beyond that, there are also lots of startups there that we help you to engage with in unlocking opportunities for you as organizations. Yeah.
Thank you. I think the last point, and I think we can't run away from this, I read on your website that you are looking to make a difference in the world. I would like to find out from you what socioeconomic impacts you think you would have as Bongo Hive, especially in the new normal that we're living in.
Well, I do think that because we focus on technology a lot, and technology is a cross-cutting theme, it helps us to be quite relevant in this period in time. And so what we've done the past, is it 3-4 months that we've had COVID? So we've run like over 30 webinars. We've been building capacity of entrepreneurs and businesses in this period of time. Right now we're training a set of civil society organizations, helping them to work remotely, helping them to understand tools. So there's a lot that we do in building capacity of entrepreneurs, understand how to leverage on technology right now. There are a couple of things, though, that are important for us going forward as an organization in leaving an impact, which is the focus on the ecosystem. So we have amazing partnerships, and like I said earlier, 23 partnerships that are super important to unlocking the potential. And if we can work more at ecosystem level, and I love the word ecosystem, but if we can...
It's a buzzword with us as well.
Yeah, exactly. If we can collaborate more, impact will be much more long term. So we genuinely push for that. The other thing which is very important is that we look at growth, opportunity. So a lot of people look at Lusaka and like, okay, I'm comfortable here or in Zambia, but big push is how do we get into the region? How do we make Zambia more attractive, even for businesses, startups that are looking to start and grow in this region? So that's really important. And thirdly, building a pipeline that's solid and gets us to where we need to be is important. And by pipeline, I mean if we can focus on what happens when people are young, when they get into university, when they have a business idea, when they have a business that's growing, when they're looking for investment, when they're partnering with corporates. This whole pipeline value chain for some people is important. And for us, we work across the value chain because we see there are gaps. But as we fill those gaps and we work with different players, we are seeing that it is becoming a bit easier, or much more easier, for businesses and people with innovative ideas to basically start their businesses, to think differently, and to grow their businesses and end up fundraising and growing and having a bigger impact on society. So I think social and economic impact comes from us working together, but unlocking those things also means that we start the businesses and grow those businesses that are really having an impact on the ground. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think it's important as corporate citizens of any kind that you give back to society and make a positive impact. Thank you very much for joining us, Lukonga. I've certainly learned a lot about the capabilities that we have in terms of digital innovation in Zambia, and I really, really appreciate your insights. I'm sure our viewers do as well. And we hope that we can have you again on another episode of Anakazi Online Banking to expand on some of the stuff we've just started to talk about today. Thank you. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us. I hope you join us again for another episode of Anakazi Banking Online Conversations. Thank you.